Tesla, a couple months ago, gave everybody a free access to self-drive. You download the software and you bang your head against the windshield and the car just begins to run, change lanes and do all sorts of things on its own. In some ways, it's so comfortable. When you are given a syllabus and they say, well, you're supposed to cover David Hume and then Thomas Hobbes and then Immanuel Kant. And then 5 minutes before the class ends, give these 5x8 cards to students, let them fill out A, B, C, D. And then once it's done, you go to the office and you read them, score them, and then go home. And then on your way home, your companion asks, so what's for dinner? And you say, well, go in the kitchen and make some food that has no butter in it. And are we going to do anything tonight? Yeah, we'll probably sit and watch a movie, and then we'll go to sleep. There is so much power and control in the routines of life. You don't have to think, you don't have to examine, you have to reflect. And because our lives are relatively small, the questions that come up, hopefully, are also relatively small. And they don't cause a great amount of distress. And it's good to be on autopilot. Because the flip side, and depending on what exactly it is that you mean by autopilot, you know, I envy my brother, Elion. Every time I call him, he says, I'm preparing for my class. What are you doing? You've been teaching for 30 years. What is it to prepare? So I'll have to keep reading and writing and doing this and doing that. And his days are just filled from the moment he wakes up. Just creating a syllabus or a format for his class. And he goes and he's very much by the book. I come to class and I say, okay, what's really worth talking about? And I don't find very many things interesting. And what that does is it makes a good amount of your day irrelevant. I mean, Zoni, I think in many ways is right in suggesting that, you know, you have young students who are filled with hope and dreams, and you come to class like a black cloud, and you kind of just rain on their parade. Is that really a fair thing to do, a just thing to do? And in some ways, it really isn't. I think because it's good to be young and it's good to have dreams and hopes. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, you have a doctorate in ABCD, then you have a postdoc, then you have another postdoc, then you have another postdoc. And you realize, well, it's such a safe place to be. You know, you bury your head in books and in classes and in writing and in talking in safe environments such as this. And then the moment this ends, you realize you have to go into life, and life is, what the hell do you do in life? I mean, first, it's useless, doesn't have much to offer. Second, if it had any use, there's so much struggle and strife in it. Why not just do another postdoc and keep just staying here? It's comfortable. Things are just known. And if I come across something that disturbs me, I can Google it, go to the library, talk to my professors. And after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I'll have another degree under my belt. It reminds me of the story, where it's a Persian story, and it has Plato in it. It's fictional, really. That Plato was really tired writing the dialogues. And so he says, my eyes hurt, my back hurts, my knees hurt, I just need to go for a walk. I've been sitting for way too long. And he walks around and he sees a boatsman. And he gets on his boat and he says, the boatsman asks, Vasudev, that's the boatsman of the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Vasudev asks Plato, where do you want to go? And Plato says, I've been writing all day and thinking all day. I'm tired. You can go and take me anywhere. It doesn't really matter. And he's very proud of all the things he's accomplished, all the writings and all of his insights. And he puts his hand in his pocket, grabs a couple of sheets of his written philosophy, gives it to the boatsman, Vasudev, and says, read this and tell me how it sounds. And this boatsman says, I don't really know how to read or write. And Plato shakes his head, disgustingly, saying, a person who doesn't know how to read or write, half of his life is a waste. But there is something to be said about people who live life, who get bombs dropped on their heads, who have to travel to 25 countries to get themselves to the US, whose parents are immigrants and they've worked really, really hard to make ends meet, and finally they are able to send their kids to school and make them come out something. There's a humility to them, that despite the harshness of life, they're very calm, serene, respectful, filled with dignity, grace. So this boatsman says nothing to Plato, but he smells his arrogance. Some time passes, and Vasudev looks at Plato and says, you see those clouds there? He says, yeah. Plato is thinking about what chapter he's going to write next, So they're kind of dark and bleak. Don't interrupt me, says Plato to the guy. He says, well, do you know how to swim, by the way? No, swimming is beneath me. I sit and write. I don't waste my time in ridiculous pleasures of life. And Vasudev looks at Plato and says, he who doesn't know how to swim, his entire life is a waste. Plato shakes his head saying, ignorant people, illiterate people always say stupid things. So as he's rowing the boat, it begins to rain, and then it begins to rain really heavily, and then it begins to storm, and there's a hurricane coming their way. And the boat is getting filled with water, more and more and more. And the heavier the boat gets, the more it sinks into the sea or the ocean or the river. And the boat sinks. And the boatsman knows how to swim. And Plato screams, help me. He says, why don't you write about swimming? Maybe that'll save your life. And that's the thing about life. Once you are forced out of autopilot, it's one thing for you to self-drive and kind of know the risks. But we have this, it's not a relative, I can't say they're my relatives, but I suppose acquaintances The in-laws, they have money coming out of their nose. They're rich. Their daughter went to dental school. Her husband went to dental school. Dental school is expensive. It's like $500,000 for each kid. It's a lot of money you got to spend. They have never worked in a dental shop. Oh, but man, they can sit and they talk for hours. But they have a kid who's has some anger issues, and he's been seeing a therapist ever since he was like 3 or 4. I guess the point I'm trying to make really is you've read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. There is this place, and I don't know why Plato never talked about this, why Jesus never talked about it. It's such a wonderful, beautiful insight to have as, I suppose, a thinker. To be able to observe, to be able to reflect, to be able to dissect any part of life, to understand it really, really well, you have to be so detached. It's like you want to see what lives inside your dog. But human nature has empathy in it, has sadness, has loss, has grief. You also hate to see yourself as someone who takes away a life for the sake of curiosity. But all of a sudden, you gradually get yourself to a place where you just see it as a thing to explore. So you tie your dog to a table with ropes and tape, and you cut his jugular. And you see this dog jerking violently, but it doesn't impact you. There is not an ounce of negative emotions about you, no self-reflection why I did this. You're consumed by one thing and one thing alone. I wonder what lives inside him. And once the dog has died and all the blood is out, you grab this razor blade or sharp knife and you cut the belly open. And you just go through it like the way you go through your closet. That's one of the things about philosophy. If, I suppose you do it in a reflective way, that you stand back and you ask why. And the why doesn't really get many answers. And all you know is that there is this huge why that you put after everything you see, observe, you reflect. But there are no answers, and it pains you. And you want to become intimate, but you can't. You're now in the habit of just asking a lot of whys. And what Siddhartha comes to realize as he is gripped with a sense of disgust about who he is and about life, about all of his journey, is that he says, I envy 2 people walking around the lake holding hands, and one looking at the other saying, I love you. I envy someone going to school and getting a postdoc despite having 5. I envy them because they can have fun with life. They can be in life. They don't question life. They don't question what it means to be human this or human that. They just love. They love their kids. And when you think about kids, really, all these ridiculous, useless things that walk into classrooms and then eventually become adults who get married and have useless kids. Because we've had 5,000 years of cultures. They tell you at a certain age you go to school, at a certain age you graduate, at a certain age you get your license, You buy a car, you get a job, you get married, you have children, you buy a house. You don't question any of it. But the moment you begin to reflect, to be a bit more detached or objective, nothing makes any sense. And I'm not quite sure if it's the best path to take. It is best to be on autopilot. Once you've been contaminated, that's a different story. There is the scene in, what is that movie? Thornbirds? Was that a movie? Thornfields? Whatever. It's like this young kid was in love with this other young kid, a man and a woman. The woman says no to him, and he's devastated. And he doesn't know how he can love anyone else besides this woman. And so he becomes a priest. The woman comes back after like 20 years. And she brings with her, a young kid. And this young kid happens to be his son. The young kid drowns while they're, swimming. And the woman looks at him and says, "Do you know who this kid was?" "Yeah, it was your son, I'm so sorry." He says, "No, it was our son." And he goes to the altar in his church and kneels and cries and screams, and he says, "Why wasn't I able to love you, God, the way I love this woman?" That once in a while you have these experiences in life, and they open you. They open certain parts of you. They reveal to you what love really tastes like, what thinking really feels like, what true emotions feel when something devastating happens to you, where you really understand from the very core of your being that life offers you no justice. Life is not fair. And then you talk to someone who's been buried in school or a life that's been comfortable in the cradle of privilege. And they keep talking about justice, and they keep talking about this, and they keep talking about that. Consider Immanuel Kant. Great guy. He thinks really, really well about things. But he's like Carlton in Prince of Bel-Air. He never left his gated community. And the one or twice that he left and he found life to be a little problematic, he didn't know what to do with it. Immanuel Kant can just sit in his room and write a book about beauty. But as Robin Williams would say in, what is that movie with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon? Matt Damon is this crazy kid. He's a genius, though. He's got all this knowledge in his head, but no practical experience. And they're sitting in the park, and Robin Williams says to him, "If I was to ask you to tell me about love, you'd quote me Shakespeare. But you've never been in a room where your wife is dying because she has stage 4 cancer, where you feel completely helpless. It's nice to be Immanuel Kant, like this beautiful book about love. He's got this wonderful article about sex and masturbation, Immanuel Kant does. But to fall in love with a woman in the 18th century, and it's a time where you don't do those things. So you have to really cross some dangerous cultural lines to find yourself in love. And all of a sudden you grab a pen and a piece of paper and you want to continue writing about what knowledge is. But you realize you have this emotion that's obstacling your writing. You can't write. Life has touched you. Life has revealed to you something profound, majestic, and everything else just pales. To have sex when you're in love is much different to just sit and think about sex. To fall in love, چون قلم در می نوشتن می شتافت، چون به عشق آمد قلم در عشق در خود شکافت. That when you're not in love, you can write about love. But when you're in love, the moment you pick up the pen to write about it, the pen refuses to write. He says, "I'm unworthy. to speak of love. I'm unworthy to write about love. So you can do whatever. I'm not participating in the charade. But going back to your question, it's good to be on autopilot. It's good not to question, not to examine. And then there is also, let me also add this other part to it. You know, sometimes you live here in this room and your life is very, very comfortable. You've had some intellectual disturbances, you know, life, you want it to go this way, it goes the opposite way. So you suffer a little bit, then you overcome it, you forget it, you know, and life goes on as usual. But if something devastating was to happen, like a 9/11, it's the first time, you know. I mean, Pearl Harbor was 50 years ago. Who remembers that? Nobody. Especially not people of this generation. They only read books about it. I don't even know if they can remember those things or even feel those things, especially since they're beginning to write that slavery was some workforce, you know, to educate black people. I mean, history is being rewritten in ridiculous ways, but it's working. You know, sometimes you're an adult and you've lived a comfortable life and devastation happens, but your skin isn't thick. You don't know what to do with the devastation. Sometimes you go to school, you get married, you have children, and then you hit a midlife crisis. And by that I mean you hit a position in life where you are forced to really, really, really think. But your thinking takes place in the background of an already made life. You're like a 30, 40-year-old person. You have your religious beliefs. You have a husband or a wife, or you have both. You have 5 kids. And now you begin to think. And when you think, the problem is you think about your religious beliefs, it doesn't make any sense. You think about why you got married, that doesn't make any sense. Why you got married to this particular person, that doesn't make any sense. And you look at this mess and you say, how the hell am I going to protect these kids? Why did I even have them in the first place? That doesn't make any sense. And then if you begin to reflect on this deeply, you realize, well, you're basically cutting yourself off from life. That's one type of reflection that happens, unfortunately, when your life is built. And it's like an earthquake, everything just crumbles. Then you have the kids in Palestine. They're like 5, they're like 6. They have nothing. And you realize from the moment they're born, they only know one thing: life is unfair. They live the gospel teaching that do not build your house on sand. The world is a sand. Whatever you build, it'll be destroyed. And so you realize that when these kids become adults, they have tasted the dysfunctional nature of life. They get married, but they've been seasoned that your wife could have cancer at any time. You could die at any time. You don't get married for love. You get married for security because life is very insecure. You know, you have children not because children are fun. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is the following. Sometimes you begin your reflective life when you have lived and built a life of autopilot. And that could be awful because your husband looks at you and says, what is wrong with you? You and I used to have great conversations, but now nothing. We used to have fun. We used to be intimate, nothing. Used to be engaged, now nothing. And your husband doesn't understand what's happening to you. Your kids don't understand what's happening to you. Here, your kids will bend over backwards to make this thing work, but you're just not reachable. You've become far too contaminated. It's like reflection equals cancer stage 4. No remedy to it. And then you, because you happen to be a kind, decent, warm person you've always been, you try to go back to the way that you've always been. But every time you go back with a good amount of reflective abilities, and you see 10 good things and 50 bad things, or you feel 10% and reflect 90%. And reflection doesn't bring about positive images. It really doesn't. Reflection always yields fruits that are bitter. The flip side is you're 14, 15, 16, you haven't really tasted life as much. And all of a sudden, you begin to like thinking deeply about things. It happens accidentally, it happens as a thing to have some fun with. Then it becomes a habit. Anything that doesn't require a good amount of reflection, you feel bad about yourself, that you're shortchanging yourself. You have this ability to think deeply about things, but this particular group always brings it to the surface, and you talk about cheesy, ridiculous things, and you hate yourself for that. And then reflection becomes really who you are. 80% reflection, and 20% autopilot, just so you can just have some fun in life. And then it's time for you to get married. You sit with your friends and they tell you how much they love their companion. And you say, yes, I love my companion too. But what's missing in your voice is passion. So, I apologize. So, anyone else? Matthew?
Yeah, sometimes in life, I guess, I just feel unmotivated. So, should we be always motivated? Or is that like a purpose of life?
So the way things usually work in America, and I'm going to always use like relationships. They're like the bread and butter of all of my classes, I suppose. Is it normal, natural for you to look at someone and find them attractive? Yeah. Is it normal for you to be infatuated as a young man, where at a certain point hormones run wild and passion erupt inside you, outside of you? Yeah. Will you buy flowers? Yeah. Will you steal some flowers because you don't have any money? Go to the cemetery the way we did. You steal flowers and you take them to the person you love? Yeah. Will you steal money to take them to In-N-Out and give them number 2? That's like a cheeseburger, fries, and a medium Coke? Absolutely. Will you write poetry for them? Yeah. When they're not around you, will you long their absence? Yeah. Will you be sad? Yeah. Will you be depressed? Yeah. Will you be angry when they said they'll call you at 6, but they call you the following day? Yeah. Will you be depressed? Yeah. Will you lock yourself in a room and cry? Yeah. These are normal things you have to have inside you. But you're so passionate and you love so much. And then you guys hang out and it's beautiful. And then you make another set of plans. Let's move in together. And you guys do, and it's great. You go to IKEA and you buy everything they have in the store. And you guys like put things together, you know, tables and chairs and all that. And then you say, honey, you make something while I put the tables and chairs together. She says, yes, I want to like eat dinner together, this table, for the first time in our house. And you guys do. It's great. And then you do this over and over and over and over again. And it's no longer as fun. Sometimes you hate even being at the same table near your companion. It's normal. And then you realize there are days where your job is done and you're driving home and you say, maybe I should just go for a walk by myself. Maybe I should just go have like food on my own. I'll go home like a couple hours. Is that normal? Yeah. But here's the problem. For the longest time in our human life, we kind of accepted the fact that first, you don't get involved in anything because you love them, because you're passionate about them. Life is tough. Whoever said that you're entitled to take a class because it's going to be fun? You take a class because you need to graduate. And you don't graduate in a field that's an extension of your soul. You don't have a soul, man. You have a degree in a field that's going to make you money because you're poor, your parents are poor, your siblings are poor. The money you make is not your own. It goes into a public fund. It belongs to the family. You know, to this day, my parents have access to my account, I have access to their account. We don't know what it means to have a personal account. It doesn't work that way for us. Okay? At a certain point, your parents look at you and say, listen, Matthew, you're 20, you're 25. You're in no position in life to decide who is good for you, who is bad for you in terms of long-term relationships. You're just a kid. You don't have a good GPS in you. You're unseasoned, untrained, you haven't lived life, they've been protecting and sheltering you for the past 20 years. Okay? It's time for you to get married. Marriage? But I don't have anything. You're not supposed to have anything at the age of 19. You're a kid. You get married. Not because you love, because it's just a thing that you do. It's part of the autopilot phenomenon. And then a couple of years later, your dad will come to you and say, Matthew, what are you waiting for? What do you mean? Children. You're getting older, you know. You're young. Energy, money. You need to play soccer with them, basketball with them. Well, you can't do that when you're 90. Hurry up. You don't get married just to enjoy your companion. What the hell is that? Marriage has only one function. Children. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is our parents didn't have a life that was romanticized. None of us knew what it meant to romanticize a life because there was no power and privilege. Today, the story is very different. You will only be with someone if you love them. You will marry them only if that love continues to exist. And just in case the love goes away and difficulty comes about, well, you'll try to resolve them the way you send texts, quickie. If they're not resolved ASAP, well, you know, it's just the wrong relationship. I'm going to walk out. You have 60 years, hopefully, Matthew. You're like a 20-some-year-old guy. You have another, hopefully, good, healthy 60 years to go. Do not romanticize life. Life has nothing to offer you but continuous struggle. If, by chance, you take a class that inspires you and you major in history, you're very, very fortunate. If, by chance, you have the privilege of getting a master's or PhD in history, you're extremely lucky. If, by chance, you have this passion to teach and you go into the business, you're extremely lucky. You're like one of those 5% of society. Now you can kind of, to some extent, romanticize life. You can go inspire other people, have access to history, okay? Express that history in a very animated way, sit somewhere and write a book about history. That's a life nobody has. But, you know, the cards are stacked against you. All of us, really. I don't know why Kim Kardashian has over 100 million followers. I don't know what she's done. But that's the culture in which we live, you know. And just in case anybody has any psychological issues, we have Eckhart Toilet. Just read his books, and in a couple of hours you'll be fixed. Everything has been romanticized. No one is exempt from this. You know, it's like students coming to me saying, "How can I write a good essay?" And how old are they? Like 20. Well, you haven't done anything with your life. You have shit for brain. You can't think. And whatever comes your way, you can't process anything well. You can't examine anything well. You don't have knowledge. You don't have information. You know, you just are this self-entitled prick who assumes that, you know, life owes you a lot of things. There is also this added difficulty, which is that's one of the problems of industrialized societies. I'm a parent. By default, I have no choice but to love my kids. Do I hate them sometimes? Absolutely. Do I dislike them? Yeah. Do I sometimes want to disown them? Yeah. I buy them the best clothes. Even though they have plenty, I buy them more. My kids are distracted. That's the only way I can gain their attention for 10 minutes because I fear I'm losing them in this fucking society. Do they watch stupid things? Yeah. I have no choice but to sit next to them so they can become addicted to my physical body. So when I'm almost dead, they can come visit me. Am I paranoid? Yeah. Do I give my kids a big house so they could live in, have a good time? Yeah. Do I take them to places? Yeah. You know what my kids have? Privilege. Do you know what's going to happen to them when they turn 20? They won't be able to live in a studio. They wouldn't know what it means to fast. They don't really know what it means to suffer. I have given them so much already. Am I going to see boredom on their face once in a while? Yeah. How old are they? 10. There is no choice. You live in a society that saturates you, gives you too much. Too much. You smoke too much, drink too much, have too much fun, have too many companions, have too much information, have too much experience. Just have too much. By the time you're 20, you got like 5 cars. What is there to look for the next 60 years? And these days you can make money in all sorts of different ways. I mean, go to TikTok. Show some skin, you have 5 million viewers. And then you get dollars coming your way. That's how this culture works. Whenever you have too many options, boredom is just right there waiting for you. So, I suppose a couple of things that maybe you can do if you have the passion or the care for it is, like Mother Teresa, go to India. Go to some states here in this country or some places in Oakland where it's consumed with poverty. Be in the presence of homelessness, sadness, suffering, struggle, people who are sick and dying. When I was 19, I said, you know what, I just want to go and volunteer for the hospice program and child life services. And these are like spaces where you have young kids, 5, 6, 10, 12, who have cancer, some terminal disease. And there's no cure. You just got to sit by them, sit by the parents. There isn't much you can say, you know, where you begin to kind of question everything you do in life. Going back to Elion's question about autopilot, that kind of puts an obstacle, a wedge. Life wants you to go this way, all of a sudden death appears or sickness appears, and you say, what the hell am I doing? Okay. The other thing you can do, since you live in the cradle of privilege, is take a lot of classes, GE classes. Just stick your head through the door, look at the instructor, before even sitting and listening to him or her. Okay? And we have these great antennas inside. You can intuit if there is a little bit of likability, if you like this guy or this gal a little bit. Okay? If you like them, sit. Then sit back and wait for them to open their mouths and say a couple of things. Listen to the tone of voice. If you like that, stick around. And then see how they express their ideas. If you like that, stick around some more. And then create a relationship with them. Because what that will do for you is it'll become like a magnifying glass. I don't know if you've ever played with a magnifying glass. Initially, when you hold it, as the sun is coming your way, the rays of the sun is all over the place. But you keep playing with the magnifying glass until it gets to a single spot. And that spot gets focused on like a leaf or a piece of paper. And then you see smoke coming out. And then smoke turns into fire. Okay? What happens when you become passionate, interested in something? You grow more and more focused. And the more focused you become, the less distracted you become, which means that things on the outside have less power to tempt you. There is a reason why we talk about Immanuel Kant, David Hume, Thomas Hobbes, Jesus Christ. These are people who are extremely focused on one or two different things. Okay? If you're able to find that focus in something that has a positive, beneficial future, that focus will give you passion. You'll find 80% of life absolutely meaningless, but that 20% will inspire and motivate you. Will you sometimes be envious of people who have things and can enjoy the simplest of things, but you can't? Yeah. But that's the price you pay. There are simple exercises you can do. Just don't eat for a day. Just go on this intentional, mindful, like not eating for like 10 hours. And what will happen is you'll find food to be very fascinating. And anyone who is eating food, you'll salivate like a dog. And then you'll go to Safeway and you'll spend like $500 on things you don't really want. You know, and you say, I'm going to break my fast like at 6 o'clock. But you're so hungry and fatigued due to fasting that you don't have the energy to make any food. So you just open like 10 bags of chips, kettle chips. You just eat the whole thing. Sure, you'll throw up, have diarrhea, stomachache, all that, but nevertheless. And you realize, well, you know, what poverty did for you is it inspired a fascination with food. That gives you meaning. Sometimes boredom comes from depression. And some depressions have to do with the way you interpret life. Some depression has to do with they coming into your life, robbing something that had an immense value for you. And you want a way out, but you can't. So you sink in more and more and more until you hit this bottom. And way in the bottom, there is nothing. You can't see anything. There's no hope. And you just have to wait. And if you're lucky, you'll come out. If you're not, you'll just end up with on the stats. Anyone else? Yeah.
But it's true.
What was your name?
Ted.
Ted?
Yeah.
That's your real name?
Yeah.
Ted?
Yeah. I'm from Ghana.
Okay.
And it's true happiness. I just wonder, like you said, we can only we have to sustain our life and sense of our family, there is very, I just wonder if there is true happiness in life.
It's difficult to say. There is happiness and there is pleasure. There is happiness with meaning. There is happiness without meaning. There is happiness that comes with fun. And there is a sort of happiness that comes with suffering. I mean, Muhammad wasn't a happy chap. Neither was Guru Nanak, nor was Jesus, nor was Socrates. These are not happy fellows. You know, they look at society and they realize society sucks, people suck, everything about life is bad. They rise up to fix things. Okay, so sometimes happiness comes from a good amount of suffering. But for people like us, you know, to keep it very, very simple and cheap and superficial, when you come out of your mother, you want your mother to hold you and to nurse you. That particular satisfaction brings about a good amount of pleasure, joy, and happiness. Okay? There comes a point where, perhaps without really knowing, your sense of pleasure, joy, and happiness come with you being an infant, but you want to turn in your crib. And you keep trying, and you keep failing, keep trying, keep failing. And then you get it. And then you're happy. And then other people look at you, especially your parents, and they say, wow, that's great. Okay? And there comes a point where your kid sister is walking, and you want to walk. And all of a sudden, your desire for happiness, or satisfaction, or pleasure, or joy is not so much in turning over in your crib, because you can already do that. It's been saturated. Okay? So then you walk. Then you run. Okay? Then you bike. Then you go to school. And then you try to figure out how to do your math as well as Johnny who sits next to you in school. So competition envy begins. If you don't have a sibling. Then license. I mean, the amount of effort, emotional investment we put into these accomplishments are enormous. I mean, people spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars doing driving schools so they could pass a test. And then they spend more thousands of dollars buying a car. And they're very proud, very happy. Okay. And then there is a good amount of joy, I suppose, in graduating from school. And then there's a good amount of joy and happiness and satisfaction and contentment and pride that comes from getting a job, making money, buying a house, getting married, having a kid, or 2 or 3 or 4. And then you get sick. And then there's a good amount of joy when you regain your health. And then there is this midlife crisis where you look at everything you've done throughout your life, whether it's Muhammad, Guru Nanak, Jesus, none of these people. There's a certain point where they look at themselves and say it's not enough, or something happens to them that makes life look so small. I mean, let's say you're married 10, 15, 20 years, you fall in love with someone else, and all of a sudden love makes your relationship feel and look so small and insignificant, and you just walk away from it. It's not very difficult. Okay? And the answer to your question really is this. As you change, your pleasures change. What brings you joy changes. What brings you satisfaction changes. What brings you happiness changes. You know, if I was to make this personal, and forgive me, I would say at this stage in my life, what would truly bring me happiness if I was to go home, look at my kids and wife and say, I'm just going to go take a nap and just not wake up. It's a painless death. It's a good death. You know, there isn't much more to talk about or think about. Are there unknowns out there? Sure. Am I interested? Not really. I'm satisfied with what little I know, which is not very much, you know. So, again, as you age and you move into different stages of your own psychological maturity, things about you just begin to change. And this is what makes, going back to the question that we were wrestling with last class, is that because we go through so many changes in one single lifetime, there are so many uncertainties, okay? The more intense those changes, the more uncertain your life is going to be. The more insignificant those changes, your life will be fine for the most part. Yeah, so.
Uh, there was a book I read a long time ago. It's called The Secret. I don't know. That's
Okay.
about law of attraction.
Yeah.
And I experienced in my life, like on the way when we came to the United States, I almost survived from a plane crash. Then my friends asked me like, "Oh, you're lucky because all the passengers were dead." And I say, "Yeah, well, because I always think positive. That's a law of attraction." So how do you explain how we attract those things in our mind or?
There are people, you look at them physically, you're disgusted by the way they look, but emotionally, you're attracted to them. Sometimes you don't like the way they look. Sometimes when they talk, they make you feel bad. I mean, they're like disgusting to listen to, but they're very intellectually attractive. You know, there's a guy who used to teach at Harvard, Michael Sanders or something. He's a nice looking man. He knows his stuff really, really well. I don't find him intellectually attractive. I don't find him, I mean, intellectually attractive perhaps in some ways because he's able to express himself and ideas really, really well. But do I want to be like him? No. He has a great audience. Like he walks into the forum and there's like 1,000 students waiting to listen to this guy. And I don't know if you've seen the new image of Jesus Christ. Have you seen the new image? The new image of Jesus, it's work done by psychologists, sociologists, and anthropologists. They said, how could Jesus look? What could he look like some 2,000 years ago in Palestine? And you should take a look at it because he looks awful. I mean, he looks worse than Socrates, okay? And then the question that you need to ask is, if Jesus looks so bad, why is it that he has so many followers? Or if that's a little too esoteric for you, do you know who Hugh Hefner is?
Yeah, the old man.
Yeah. So he's like a 110-year-old guy. He looks awful. But if you look at his life, you realize he's surrounded by 20-year-olds. They're like angels, very, very attractive. But these angels are hanging out with the devil. Okay? The question is why? Well, because the name Playboy has a great amount of power to it. It gives you recognition. It gives you fame. It gives you power. It gives you money. It gives you a house. It gives you a future that's secure. And those are very, very attractive things to be around. The point, you can be attracted to different things. You could be disgusted by someone's looks, but very attracted to someone's mind. There was a movie, I know I'm digressing, that's what I do usually, it's because dementia and all that. It's called Eulogy, I think, with Penelope Cruz and some old guy. So Penelope Cruz is a student in like a university, and Ben Kingsley is the professor. I think he teaches literature or English. Now he's old, he's ugly, not really, but let's just say she's young and she's hot, and that's like reality. And for some strange reason, they get together, and she says, "I'm attracted to you." That doesn't make any sense. I mean, how could you be attracted to some guy who's like 3 times your age? I mean, you can't be attracted to his body, but what happens is you're so attracted to his mind that all of a sudden his body becomes relevant. Okay. Going back to your question of laws of attraction, is it true that you could be attracted to, say, some Jesus fellow? Yeah. I mean, first, your culture is somewhat religious. You guys practice certain rituals very, very closely from Eritrea. You could be attracted. And maybe somewhere deep down, once in a while, you pray for some fellow like that to walk into your life. Okay? But that attraction is not enough for you to ultimately walk the path of Jesus. You're not going to become a hermit. You're not going to walk into a cave. You're not going to like roam the country to look for wise people, to learn things from them. Are you attracted to such ideas? Yeah. Are you attracted to such temperaments and personalities? Absolutely. But to embody the qualities that exist in the thing to which you're attracted, there is lots of things to overcome. I mean, that's why it's easy for me to walk around saying, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, I'm a Sikh, I'm a philosopher. Labeling is easy. But doing what is underneath those labels, it's nearly impossible because you have to give up so many things. So yeah, you could be attracted, but it doesn't mean anything. Some days when I get to campus around like 4 o'clock, I'm very attracted to go there, make myself a cup of coffee and write. I'm attracted to that idea. My brain is dead. It's exhausted. I try to find ways to overcome it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So you need will, power, you need knowledge, you need information, you need sacrifice. And these are ways, too many things. Stevie?
Why do you always use?
Because they're cheap, and they're silly, and they're easy. Just like the way I use Snoop Dogg. It's cheap, silly, and stupid. There's nothing wrong with using cheap things and then making them a bit expensive later on. Mandeep? No? Oh, how do you say your name? Mahandeep, yeah. Mahan. Does it mean many moons? The what? Greek? Great. That's it? Anything else? Yeah.
So last night I was watching Moses, you know Moses?
Yeah, I know him personally. Him and I used to hang out, yeah.
And then Moses, you know, he had a very privileged life with Prince.
Yeah.
Before he gave it up to the whole the Jewish people, I think, the Jewish people.
Sure.
Moses freed the Jewish people. I don't know if they were called Jewish or not. But he's their savior. That's why Jewish people honor Moses. Moses is kind of not like Jesus to the Christians, but close. And at first he didn't pity the people, but then he found out that he was them, found out that those were actually his people. And at first he would watch them suffer or get he wouldn't feel anything. But then his sister found him and she told him that that was her brother. And then after that he saw the people suffer and sweat and he was really in pain.
Okay.
Because I guess he started thinking them as him, and at first I guess he thought of them as a different type of animal, but then he didn't think of them as him.
So there's a
And
question?
he left his privileged life, because he was perfect, he had a perfect life.
Is there a question?
Everything. But he gave it up because he couldn't walk out and know that all his money came from all the pain and suffering.
Is there a question?
So, do you think that people only feel pain for others? They think that they are somehow related, like in race, or like, do you think people will pity others if they think they are them? Like if they see themselves in them?
I haven't really read the Old Testament. It's a funny little book. I go back to the 3rd century. His name was Marcion. He had argued that we need to get rid of the Old Testament God. In fact, the Old Testament period because there are lots of flaws in there. The God in the Old Testament is...
I don't agree with that. Yeah, you know,
I'm just telling you what Marcion said, man. It's not about you agreeing or disagreeing. So, the best book of Moses that I've read is Charlton Heston, The Ten Commandments. At least how the movie portrays Moses is that he's a conflicted fellow. Conflicted in the sense that you're mean, you're kind, you're mean, you're kind. You have a home, but you feel homeless sometimes. Then you have a home, you feel homeful, then you feel homeless. Unlike his brother Ramses. So whenever you're conflicted, you have issues. And when the part that is conflicted blossoms, then yeah, your empathy grows. You begin to feel, at least act a bit more human. Some temperaments are just meant to be miserable.
I mean, Ramses didn't feel any pain for those people because he wasn't of the same race.
No.
He was actually of his own.
I mean,
And Moses felt no pain
just,
because he was their race.
yeah.
That's why Ramses didn't feel that conflict.
Anyone else? Mandeep? Go ahead. Matthew?
Yeah, this one, I guess, will be, do you think life is kind of like a cycle? Like you'll get another life after, or do you think this is the
Say the last part again.
like the cycle, like in kind of Asian philosophy?
Like reincarnation stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
reincarnation. Yeah, or do you think, this is the only time we'll ever be here, and then we'll go to heaven or hell after, and then will that affect, I guess, our life choices? Because if it's a
So, first of all, let me just say that reincarnation took a long time to be developed and to be put for public consumption in India. And then Jains took it, Sikhism took it, Taoism, Buddhism, all these different isms began adopting this particular philosophy. But it took a long time. Initially, for the Hindus, there was only one life, this is it. And be a hedonist. You're here, this is the only life you have. Extract as much pleasure as you possibly can. But be careful of your choices because choices have consequences. You want to have sex, have sex. Make sure that the person you're having sex with is disease-free. Okay? And so all of a sudden life becomes a little complicated. Okay? You can't just go out there and have fun because to do fun means that there's a resting period and then there's a return. Okay? The sort of emotions you'll have, the sort of thoughts you have, the sort of social impact that'll be visiting you. Then some people came to realize that there are certain things in nature, for example, that they get destroyed, they come back to life. They get destroyed, they come back to life. And they saw human beings as part of nature. Okay? Now, a couple of things about reincarnation. You can make reincarnation or give it a very abstract, esoteric, spiritual interpretation, or you could make it a bit more practical, realistic. So let me first give you the practical, since I like realistic stuff, things that you can use in some shape or form down here, as opposed to, becoming a hippie. So, I'm going to use the life of an alcoholic within the context of reincarnation. Okay. So life is problematic, or maybe your cells or genes crave that stuff. You've inherited from your parents, your grandparents, or whatever. So you drink. Then you throw up. Then you say, I'm never going to do this again. Then you put yourself, your body in the same physical environment with the same group of people, you drink again. And you do so because you forget. And then you throw up. Then you say, I'm never going to do this again. Then you drink again. Then you throw up. Then you realize your body is growing the capacity to drink more and more without throwing up. So if before you only drank 2 bottles and you throw up, now you drink 25 bottles. Then you get married. You're still drinking. And now you throw up all sorts of things, not only outside on the curb, but also on your wife, and your kids, and your life. Then something, and remember why you're doing this. There's a certain way you're thinking about problems. There's a certain way you think about pleasure. There's a certain way you think about alcohol. And the way you're thinking about these things keep repeating themselves. And now what you have is habits. Now you're in the grips of habits. They control you. Every time you go home, first you drink, then you have dinner, then you drink some more, then you puke. Okay? There comes a point where you say, I don't want reincarnation anymore. I don't want to be incarnated anymore. I want this to be my last birth within the context of drinking. So you say, I'm going to go to AA. I want to change the way I think, and I want to change the way I feel, and I want to change the way I behave. So what you have in the Asian tradition is what we call a cyclical nature of life. That it starts at this point, it goes around, and then it goes back to the same point, and then it goes around. The life of an alcoholic, okay? And that's true of Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, all these isms. Then you have what we call the Western traditions, of course, wrongly Western, but nevertheless. You have Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These are what we call linear traditions. And linear means from here to here. You only have one lifetime to fix who you are. Once you die, you will find yourself in the presence of God. Just in case you're a piece of shit, eternal damnation awaits you. Or if you're slightly lucky, purgatory. Okay? What you have in Hinduism, for example, you are given countless number of lives to come back, do the same stuff, hopefully attain perfection, like the Buddha sit somewhere, look down and say, you know what? I want to go back down here. It's what they call nirvana. Not para-nirvana, but nirvana. I want to go back to life, not because life is fun, but because that guy over there is suffering. And if I go down, I want to go down as a woman, be his wife. And every time he drinks, I'll slap him. Okay? Now, there is another way of looking at reincarnation, which is reincarnation exists because something about us sees flaws, feels the flaws, and we choose to come back to life, to fix them, to ultimately, like the Buddha, become a god and leave and never come back. Okay? There is the political aspect of reincarnation that appears in the West, because you were born here, so you're a Western, which is, at a certain point, Eastern philosophies began to leak into Europe. Okay? The problem with Christianity is the following. You're born in sin, you have one chance to fix your life, because once you die, you're going to find yourself in the presence of God. Okay? And the only way it can be done is by the grace of Jesus. You have to accept him. People found his teachings to be a little difficult, and partly it was the church's fault. Reincarnation comes in and says something really interesting. You know, you don't just have one life. Stop struggling so much. Stop living in pain so much. You can live countless lives. Just be mindful. Just live a certain lifestyle, so when you come back, don't come back as a plant, come back as maybe an animal, maybe come back as a human being. Don't come back as a human being with disabilities, physical disabilities, come back maybe as emotional disabilities, then intellectual disabilities, and you evolve. And so all of a sudden the church numbers, in other words, the masses began to shrink If you had 10 people who come to church on a Sunday, now you have 2. Why? Reincarnation. So what happens? Now you have a guy by the name of John Sitzel, I think. You have the selling of indulgences. That began, at some time. Whatever. So anyone else? Did you get that? Yeah. I just got tired, and it's nonsense. Alexis? Let's make this the last question, and then we'll go home.
He starts being very focused on going to class. And class comes up. I'm very focused. It's very positive.
For those of you who may not know, it's about this 50-year-old woman who finds herself to be unhappy. One of her friends tells her there's a guy in India who can help you. He's this guru. And the word guru basically means someone who takes away your darkness and gives you light. And so she goes to India and she has her own assumptions about what the spiritual path looks like, what it means to find a teacher, what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be a student. And he crushes all those assumptions because that's a mark of a really, really good teacher who knows what he's doing. And little by little, she falls in love with this man. Not so much by love, I don't mean that they have sex. She falls in love with his house, she falls in love with the courtyard, she falls in love with the chair she sits on every single day while he's sitting next to her. She falls in love with his voice, with the way he thinks, with the way he looks, and with his physical body, but without the intimacy. There is a verse by Hafiz, چون که صد آمد نود هم پیش ماست. Imagine for a moment that you've always hungered to have a $100 bill in your pocket. But right now you only have 10. So you have to start saving your money. 10 becomes 15, then 20, then 30, then 40, then 50, then 60, then 70. And every time someone gives you some money, you go back and you count how much money you have from the very beginning. But your goal is to get to 100. That's a number for perfection. And Hafiz says, well, when you have 100, it means you have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 99. You have all the numbers. When you find yourself in the presence of something that doesn't complete you, you still have a life to go back to. And sometimes you don't walk away from something that completes you because you've really come to realize it's insufficient. But maybe it's a little too frightening because you know it will complete you, but it will uproot your life. So you walk away or run away, okay? What you have is, if you read through the 900 pages of the book, is that she has assumptions. Those assumptions get destroyed. She now doubts. She's disgusted. She's angered by this man. She grows to have a very unique sense of love for him. It's a love that has no hatred inside, no anger inside, no doubt inside. And the more she loves, the more passive she becomes. And that's one of the things about love, okay? And one of the things about the symbolism of a lamb is submission. Let this cup pass by me. No, thy will be done. Into thy hands I give my soul. There's this element of submission. So after a while, she says to this guy, at least she writes, that whatever you want to do to me, fine, okay? When someone becomes that, occupies that big of a space inside you, they become your past, your present, and your future. And so whatever personal past existed for you, they disappear. But let me just also add this caveat, which is You're talking about a 50-year-old woman. You're talking about a woman